All right. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to this series of coach trainings that Ad Astra is putting together and finding really brilliant, smart people to do things. Aside from the guy that helped with a couple others was talking to you tonight. I'm really pretty excited about this, and one of the reasons I'm excited about it is that there was a series of years where I could not wait to get to a particular tournament in the state, specifically Salina Central, so that my duos could go head to head with Jamelle's, because I always knew we weren't going to beat them, but we were going to have a pretty good idea where we stood in comparison when it was over, and I really looked forward to that. And so tonight, it's really a pleasure to introduce Jamelle Brown to you, to do this duo interp coaching session. And I'm not going to talk long. I'm just going to turn it over to Jamelle and let her do what she does. Jamelle, it's yours.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm excited to be here with all of you this evening. I love this activity, and I know we all do. And so anytime I have an opportunity to talk about the stuff I love, I'm all for it. So thank you for the option to talk about duo interp, and I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So just my little disclaimer at the beginning, I'm not claiming to be, I am not Tommy Lindsay, who was like my, I remember when I first started coaching, I was like, oh my gosh, they should name duo interp after Tommy Lindsay for NSDA. So I am definitely not Tommy Lindsay, and I do not claim to know it all. I'm just going to give you my kind of formula for duo, and we definitely can make this interactive, and I want lots of people to share, ask questions, and I know we're going to learn from one another. But I am at Sumner Academy of Arts and Science in Kansas City, Kansas. This is year number 19 at the Academy, been there for a long time. And I also competed in high school. So I started my journey with this activity as a freshman at Turner High School with Jeannie Bond. And I fell in love, just like I know all of our students hopefully do, not all of our students, but a lot of our students, with this activity. Duo did not exist when I was in high school. It was just duet acting. Duo is one of the newer events, even though it's been around a while, but duo is one of my faves. And so we're going to kind of dive in a little bit. I just, a little quick bribe, our moment to just kind of like say something fun. Let me move to the next slide. I have not had any finalists at NSDA Nationals, but I've had several finalists at CFL. And these are two of my duos individuals who were in finals at CFL Nationals twice. And it's pretty cool because these two wonderful, amazing former students that I love to death are now like famous in their own right. Kaylin Allen works for Ellen DeGeneres and has been signed now to the Food Network. And you'll be able to see Kaylin on the Food Network every single day on his own talk show. And he became famous from like social media, which is pretty cool. But I always tell people, Kaylin became famous when Kaylin started competing in competitive speech and debate because he found like his niche. And then, believe it or not, Deontay, who was his partner, the other gentleman standing here as his duo partner, is now a famous drag queen. Yes. And he does drag all across the country, which is really a cool thing. And so I just love telling their story because that's what we do as teachers. We brag on our students. And so I love telling their story. So out of all of our interp events, I think duo has its own special formula and different things that make duo super unique. I think because of the whole idea that you have two people coming together, right there alone is what makes duo really special. But also because you have so many options in the world of duo, I think it's just one of those events that really allows students to have a piece of the pie in regards to how, as an interpreter, they're going to allow their voice to be heard. So we're going to talk just a little bit about kind of what makes duo unique, some different duo strategies. We're going to watch a couple of example things, and then open it all up for some discussion and questions. So I think one of those first things is, of course, the partner dynamic. We have a few events in this whole activity that allow students to work together in a partnership. And so this is, of course, our only interp event that allows that partnership. It is so important to allow students to understand, are we thinking about who we want to partner with, or are we thinking about the material? And I used to have a policy: if you're dating this individual, if they're your best friend, don't assume that that's going to be your best duo partner. Well, of course, then I have a partnership that was probably one of my most successful duos, dated. They're now married with 4 kids. But I always thought, oh my gosh, if you're in a relationship with this person pre coming into this class or this activity, partnerships, it won't work. Well, they proved that completely wrong. So you're going to kind of figure out, of course, for any of our new coaches out there, how you want to set up your policies in regards to allowing partnerships. And I have stolen some ideas from folks out there. And I know a lot of people do some really cool things to partner up individuals for policy debate. You can do some of those same different things with duo, but you have to have the right combination of individuals. And so I always want to pick the piece before the partnership. That just seems to work best in my neck of the woods. So that's one of the things that makes this activity duo really, really unique. Also, it's an interp event. And I know that sounds like, of course, we know it's an interp event, but the fact that it's an interp event can't get lost in the shuffle of everything. There has been a lot of styles that have been introduced in this world of duo. You have local styles, you have national styles, you have some duos. Choreography is so key, and really what made it pop was the choreography. You have some duos, it's just that good old fashioned acting, but you have all these different elements out there. But what we can't let students forget is it's an interp event. And interpretation is all about taking that literature and allowing it to come alive, and allowing that voice behind the literature to really shine. And so I think allowing students to realize, I have this awesome opportunity to find literature that speaks to me, or speaks for me, or speaks about me, or allows me to have a glimpse of someone else. That's powerful. That's powerful. And then the third thing I think that really makes duo and unique is the blocking. And I love blocking duos because there's so many options that you can throw out there. And it's all about the illusion, right? It's the illusion that these two individuals are giving eye contact, and that they're touching each other, and that they're in this place that, of course, doesn't exist right now in the present, but we're imagining that's happening. But the blocking is what also really can make the duo pop. So those are our 3 kind of fun things. So thinking back about this whole idea that it's an interp event, I don't think we need to focus a lot on the whole partnership dynamics. So we're going to first talk about, what makes an interp event, especially duo, important and key, and how do we kind of instill that notion into our students. So just a working definition that we all are very aware of. Interp events, as an oral interpreter, your responsibility is to make the words of the author live. Like, you're making these words pop and making these words come alive. Your task is to breathe energy into each page of a selected script. That script selection, so key, so key. I have had students who pick pieces for a variety of reasons. I've had pieces that I have looked at and I said, oh my gosh, I'm telling you, trust me, take this, read this script is for you. And it works both ways. And no matter what, at the end of the day, that script has to become magical for those 2 students who are going to perform it and make it come alive. So my little side note about selecting material and how do we make sure we're allowing the voices to be told like correctly or in that magical way. I get asked quite often, Ms. Brown, do you let students pick material that maybe the intent was not for that particular student to perform? So for example, I always can easily go to one of my favorite playwrights, August Wilson. August Wilson definitely has a formula with all of his plays. The main character in almost every single one of his scripts is kind of generated towards an African American male. And so I've had people ask all the time, and I love when people ask me because I appreciate the question because that means people want to tell the story correctly. Is it okay if someone who is not, originally probably the author's intent to play that role, is it okay through our lens of being an interpreter to still go in and perform that piece of lit? And what I tell students, what I always respond to when someone asks me that question is the word responsibility in this definition, I think is super important. And we have to think kind of in our DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion lens, like, am I, first of all, respecting the author's intent? And am I understanding the voice of that subject matter? And am I giving it justice? And then whatever decision you come up with, you have to be able to own that and realize that you're taking ownership of that. And that's a big responsibility. For example, I have a great friend who has been very successful in duo, who has a duo that made it to the final stage that is about two students. It's about two students are actually playing in the part who are husband and wife. And it's called, oh my gosh, what is it called? Light, I think is what it's called. Or I think it's Light. I'm going to look it up to make sure I'm giving you the right title. But these two individuals are married, but the male in the piece is playing two parts, also the son and the father. The son is autistic, but he is an adult, and he is like at the point in his life, probably 22, 23. He's out of school. He's no longer in the school system. Mom is doing the best she can to take care of him. And the struggle is sometimes mom can't always either physically take care of him because he's a grown man, and here's mom, maybe a little bit more petite than son, and son is autistic on the probably spectrum that allows him to be very physical at times. Also, you have the storyline of, at what point do I let go and allow possibly for me to have to allow him to live in a group home or elsewhere. Talking to the coach of that piece, I remember him explaining, this is not the story of the two students who were necessarily playing in the duo, like the two students who were acting. They maybe didn't have any experience of what it was like to deal with someone who is autistic and caring for someone who was autistic. But the coach of that duo did have that story that they could tell. And so they were able to impart that knowledge on those two individuals. And they were able to do the research to understand, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What is a typical day going to look like for someone who is caring for someone who is autistic? And so doing that backstory, doing that research, talking to individuals who have walked in those shoes, that's a part of the responsibility an interpreter would have, to tell that story and to tell that story correctly. So I just always tell kids, other adults who ask, we got to tell stories appropriately, correctly, and then we have to own those so that we are not being disrespectful to any groups, or we're not turning someone's story into a joke or anything that's going to cause communities of individuals to feel as though their story has been lost because someone told it incorrectly. I'll get off that little soapbox. But duo, just like all of the other interp events, is a beautiful way to tell stories. And that story is what matters. However, the two interpreters actually tell the story. It's all about storytelling. And so that's so, so important. Also, one of the amazing things is the cutting. And we're going to talk about cutting just for like a few minutes, but the cutting is an opportunity to express yourself as a performer. And, it's like we've been gifted this piece of literature from the author, from the playwright, and you get to manipulate, but carefully without losing the intent and the actual desire that that author or that playwright had to compose this beautiful work of art that now an audience, whether if that's one person in the back of the room as your judge, your class during the day in a classroom setting, or whoever that audience, they now get to enjoy that piece of art that you created thanks to the playwright and to the author. And then when we consider any risks involved in telling those stories, remember those core values and being relatable to the characters and doing the backstory and the research and understanding how important it is to tell that story correctly. Especially, sorry that my phone is ringing in the background, when we're telling the stories that are real stories in regards to someone's life. Any questions at this point or any comments? Again, sorry that my phone is ringing and it's all the way on the other side of the room. Finding duo material. This is probably sometimes the hardest, most difficult part, especially for newer coaches coming into a program that has a library or coming into a program and nothing was left behind for you. I think one of the nice pluses in this digital age is finding material is not as challenging as it was, 10, 20 so years ago. We have a lot more resources, but it still is a challenge in the sense maneuvering what kind of material works best for which students and what have you. I, for all interp events, prefer novels because I feel like you have a lot to work with. I just grabbed a couple of examples from school, just grabbed a couple of things off my bookshelf, but cutting from a novel, I believe personally, this is just what works best for my team and I. Novels, yes, we have a lot to go for. And literally, there is unlimited literature out there. I don't think if every program in the country was cutting 1,000 pieces in one day, we would even touch how many pieces of literature there is, of course, out there and all the options and opportunities that exist. And so there's so many ample things. Thank you, all the authors in the world who've written some amazing pieces of literature, but novels, and either novels that a student may have read or something completely brand new to them. It also gives them, and it forces them to read a little bit and to touch actual books and literature, which is an art form we don't want to lose, but it seems like is not as, prevalent as it used to be. So novels and giving them that opportunity to read full novels and cutting from there, I think is great. Of course, scripts, a wonderful place to cut. That dialogue is already embedded in there for us, especially if we're doing multiple characters in our duos, which I think is a great thing. One acts, full-length plays, either way, you can't go wrong, but some great, of course, literature out there again. And then now we have this world of having so many other, like the third category, I would just kind of say other. We have all of the companies out there that create the pre-scripted scripts. We even have companies out there that will write and publish material for you. I kind of put that in category number 3 because that kind of takes away the step of being able to cut your own piece. But I'm not saying that that option is not a great option, especially when you have lots of kids that you're trying to find material for and that need material. That definitely is out there as an option, especially the companies that have all of the different pre-scripted kinds of things. The only thing, of course, you're going to run into when you are picking from those different sources is the repeats you may hear in the circuits. And if you had access to it, probably everyone else has access to it. So that's my third go-to. And just simply mainly for that reason, you don't have as many unique options as you would being able to read some good old-fashioned novels. Cutting your duo, again, I always explain to kids kind of the breakdown and how your times should look. I don't think this is anything we need to go into in a lot of detail. This is the same structure, of course, for all of our interp events. But you've got to have that storyline. When cutting from a novel, which of course, again, is my love, there's so many things I can come back to. I think that's another thing I like about novels. That first, second, third cutting may not be the cutting, but I usually have something else to go back to versus a pre-created script that's pretty much already done for me. It's this or nothing else. I mean, I don't have anything else if I decide I want to change my exposition or I want to have something else with my climax. I'm kind of stuck with what's there versus a novel. I can go in a whole nother different direction. One thing we have to be careful with though, with novels is sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to pull out that dialogue the way that we need and want the dialogue to be embedded. And so it takes more time, it takes more effort to making sure we're cutting things correctly and legally, but in giving, of course, the author's intent. But again, we have more that we can go back and grab from. And then, of course, just making sure those cuttings, even if it's from a pre-scripted something, has this mountain. Right now in my room, you'll see these mountains all over the room. Everyone had to, all the interpreters, even if they cut their material a week ago, or if they're still in the process of cutting, or they've already cut it a while back, they're using it from a novel, wherever, they still need to lay out these different elements of their performance, whether it's DI, HI, poi, prose, and duo. Those events, they all had to do their story mountains and lay out what are all these different elements of my actual performance. If there's no rising action in that duo, the climax will probably be, no one will know. And I've had some really bad cuttings that I've coached over the years. And I think when I think back about what went wrong, usually something went wrong in how it was cut and how it was structured, and something was missing. And it usually is no clean, clear climax. At what point is that character or those characters at the point where now things need to change so we can have that falling action and that denouement or that resolution? So it's usually at the climactic point where things get confusing and kind of go haywire. So that's when cutting, you want to really explain to kids, how do we reach that climax? Any questions, comments, or anything before we watch just two little, quick little sample duos and talk about a little bit of introductions? And
I got a question.
Yes.
Hi,
Wesley.
So I saw on your little outline right there, the line breakdown. So early in the season, I typically tell my students to shoot for 8 minutes because they're going to get so much feedback that they're going to be frustrated they can't do anything with if I go for that 10-minute target.
Absolutely.
Is there a way that you would restructure this time to fit with 8 minutes? How would you look at that?
That's a good point. I would always, if I was changing things around, so your falling action and that ending, I feel like doesn't need a whole lot of time as you do usually at the beginning of your piece. And so just kind of changing up your numbers so that they still have that extra 2 minutes at the end that you would want them to have in order to, make changes, change things up. And depending on how flexible you want them to be, I would probably just take some time off of each little section and making sure that 2 minutes was left. I'm glad you mentioned that, because also I try to never, I don't want them to reach quite 10, because we know every single round, the performance is going to feel and look a little different.
Right.
And I try to stay definitely away from any kind of grace period, whether if it's 15 seconds or 30 seconds, even if it's like written into the rules that it's allowed, definitely try to stay away from that.
Yeah.
But I like that you're giving them, hey, 8 minutes at the beginning of the season to allow for flexibility and changes.
Right.
Good.
All right. Thanks.
Good question. Thank you. All right. So I think I have to come out of this to share my screen with the video because it's behind this. But introductions. So I think introductions is a really another great like action or like thing we can add into what makes Duo unique. And one thing I've noticed over the years is introductions have, of course, changed, just like styles have changed. And it seems like with Duo, introduction styles has changed more than maybe any other event. And so I'm going to show you 2 quick duos. Both of them are from NSDA. Both of them are from the final rounds of kind of different styles that can be utilized in regards to introductions and also thinking about like types of duos. One of them is virtual from last year, as you can see here from last year, 2021, and this one is from 2016. So I am going to minimize this screen. Open this up. We are just watching the teaser for both of these duos. So just the first few minutes and we're going to talk about them. I probably need to share my computer sound so you can hear. There we go. Let's try this again. Let me know if you can't hear.
Hola, Ana. Hi, Sandra. I'm so nervous for my interview. I sit. Oh, sí, with Nancy Robbins. Yeah. But you know what? What? I got some tips that'll guarantee you're gonna get the job, okay? Okay. All right, so question 1. What day is the 4th of July? Do you know? No? How many stars have the flag? What? How many stripes? And then you wrap it up with a God bless America, land that I love. I love it. And then you don't tell me you have a kid, okay? Okay. Because if you tell me you have a kid, you're gonna get fired. What? Okay, mija, that's it. Huh? That's it, I gotta go. Hey, don't be late, you'll be fine. Motherhood is a universal language. Hola, Tomás. Tell me everything about El Salvador. Because of prejudices and biases between cultures, that language can be lost. Do you miss me? I miss you up to the sky. Through Nancy, a hardworking mother. Hey, you're gonna come over here real soon, okay? No, not for vacation. You're gonna come here to live. And Anna, an El Salvadorian immigrant working for her. If I promise to sing, then you gotta promise to go to bed, okay? We will learn respect and understanding come not from standing against each other, hurling insults. Alaruru niño, alaruru ya. But by standing together, embracing our shared humanity. Living Out by Lisa Loomer.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it right there just for us to see the teaser. Okay, they have a lot going on in this teaser. They are, I think, phenomenal. Tell me some of the things that you noticed about their style, about their introduction, just right there in that exposition moment in the teaser, and then also adding into the introduction. What did you gain as far as style choices?
Jamelle, I really liked how the story continued in the background, and yet you were getting the exposition that we need. I thought it was a beautiful blend of both of those.
Oh my gosh, Don, I completely agree. It was as if they were able to knock both of those things out at the same time. And you're right, they executed it so well with only one person coming out of character to give us, you know, that traditional intro while the other one stayed in character. I think that I agree. It was beautiful.
I think their sense of timing and their ability to use their blocking so well puts the observer right inside of that living room, or breaking the third wall where we're inside looking in, watching this happen in front of us. And it's they're mesmerizing.
I agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other thoughts, ideas? They also, just a couple of other things, the song, a nice touch. You know, sometimes adding music, adding songs can feel too gimmicky or what have you. It was, to me, like the perfect timing. It was beautiful. It matched what was happening. It was appropriate. Like it worked so well. And Pam touched upon this. Their blocking, you can tell, was carefully like planned in regards to the crossing that they did in multiple places. I mean, it just all blended well. And then also, of course, we got their levity in the beginning, their light moment. We definitely want that levity, especially somewhere in the exposition, because it allows the audience to feel, okay, I'm comfortable with this. This is great. So that levity was introduced to us also really nicely at the beginning.
Do we know if these two are sisters?
You know what? I don't know if we ever 100% knew that. I assumed they were cousins or sisters because let me see. Well, that's right. When we get the names, I look at some point. I can't remember if this year, some years we have the names, and we should. Let me find.
Our 4 months appearance. Our fifth speakers, number 118,
I'm not 100. Okay, there we go.
Living Out.
Yes, I assume that they're cousins, or either first cousins or sisters. I'm assuming sisters because they look so much alike. Yes. Good question. I don't know. I'll have to find that out. Let me get back to my. All right, so we're going to watch a virtual example and kind of do the same thing. Think about the styles. Duo was probably, for me and for my team, the most difficult virtual event to navigate through because of the rules that my school district had in place at the beginning of everything in 2020 and 2021. So we were like not even allowed to go into the school. We couldn't bring kids together until spring of 2021. Duo was not easy for us. However, a lot of schools figured it out and figured it out incredibly well. And so I enjoyed watching Duo grow virtually, because if we remember how it looked the first summer we went virtual for NSDA Nationals in 2020, and then how it looked last summer, you definitely saw a lot of growth, and you saw a lot of people definitely invested in learning how to make the camera work in their favor. And so I think, like Russ said this earlier, this is a new reality for all of us. And so learning how to adapt duo virtually is super important. So that's intentional to have a second example as virtual with the split screen. All right, I'm gonna play this and I'm going to go answer that phone and turn my ringer off.
Is this spot taken? So, who'd you come here to see?
I was hoping to see an old friend. I figured these old bones are going to live forever.
Mine either. You make it through so much and you're only left with a hat and a cane.
Did you surf?
I did.
A memorial?
A memorial for us all.
Not all of us, but their hearts were in the right place.
What do you mean?
Well, I fought with American soldier during the war, but some of my brothers' names are not on the wall.
Ah, I see. Hey, I recognize that. That's a magician's coin.
It was given to me by my first American friend. He always loved to play trick on us. What did you say your name was?
An old friend.
Max?
You kept my coin, Bin.
Oh, Max!
Max and Bin are different in almost every single way. But what brings them together is a war and a dream.
Although this is a performance, it is also a tribute to our grandfathers who fought for America during the Vietnam War.
Just like our grandfathers, Max and Bin fight for something bigger than themselves.
The American Dream. Friendship Forged Through War by Christy Thomas.
Say you want a revolution.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it right there. And I intentionally picked this duo because of the simplicity in it. And I also thought that they had some really great acting, but I really liked the simplicity on how they made the split screen work and blend well. I was judging this final round and I thought that this would be a good example to kind of show this evening. So tell me what did you notice? What did you think? What seemed to work? Or what were your thoughts for this duo's teaser?
You know what? One of the things that I love about duo is how technical it can be and how perfect that technicality needs to be to look good. And you're right, this is really simple, but even that handshake thing that they did across the screen is like, if you think about what it took to practice that and to frame it and to get the video to work, that I suspect that moment took more practice than any of us want to think about.
I imagine you were probably correct. Wow, that timing had to be perfect, like you said. Yes, yes.
Well, and even the spacing of it had to be.
And then even like when you look here at the curtains, how like, I mean, it just had to be so perfectly. And this was the, remember there was 2 duo divisions. This was the asynchronous version of duo for last summer. So they were all pre-recorded. It wasn't performed live. But that does not mean, like you said, that it did not take a lot of.
Well, and having played with the split screen stuff, like we have iPads, and that's what we did everything with. Our kids are 1-to-1 with iPad. To get that look, like we were able to get that look in a couple of our music practice rooms. But then it was which iPad is set this way and which iPad is set that way, and is this one mirrored and is that one mirrored not, and like there's just a lot of, to get that to match up that well, those curtains to line up that well on a stage, just the staging of it was pretty impressive.
I agree. The technicality is on a whole nother level. Like we had to learn a whole new skill set, all of us, this past year. Absolutely. Any other comments or thoughts?
So you had you had mentioned how much shorter it was with the introduction, like the part as it breaks away from the teaser. And I'm wondering, is that I'm trying to remember, is that a thing that everything is trending towards, or is it specific to this?
Are you referring to the actual physical time for the teaser? Or
Yeah. Well, from the teaser to the title author kind of, boom, boom, here we go.
Right. It was shorter than what normally, I think, kind of there's no form, it has to be this time or what have you.
Right.
But it was shorter than what we're kind of used to seeing. And I think it's because this piece is so concentrated on the acting and the story that we really, I feel like Christy Thomas, the playwright, wanted to get into it quickly. So let's get through the teaser, let's get through that exposition, because so much of this piece, I feel like, is rising action. And so that whole time frame thing I just gave you, this completely throws that out, because yeah, you're right. They get, oh my goodness, y'all, I thought this was turned on. I'm so sorry. It got into that section quickly in regards to getting through that.
And it just makes me think about so much media. TV shows used to have, your long theme songs that went on for a long time, and as it introduced all the characters and their catchy tunes and everything. And over the course of the past decade or so, it's just kind of gone lost, boom, done, or whatever it is. And you just don't see a long, theme song like that really much anymore. And I'm wondering if the same is true of interps. I feel like I need to go back over the past few years and watch to know for sure.
That's a good question. That's a good question. I have noticed that trend. And last year, thinking of this same final round, I noticed theirs was the shortest in regard to that time frame for the teaser. But I think that is kind of a little trend that we probably will see more often in regards to getting through that teaser and that introduction a lot faster, so that we can really get into the meat of the story.
Jamelle, you judged this round, so this is a technical question that's not about the intro and teaser. There's a lot of headspace in this video. Is that because of something that happens later in the duo where they needed that kind of space, or do you think that's just the way they filmed it? And did you notice a trend in that?
Good question. They ended up, so it was almost like flashbacks and age flashbacks with the characters. And as the duo progressed and one of the characters was older, he got closer and closer. I noticed, and I feel like that was an intentional blocking choice, closer and closer into the frame, or closer and closer to the camera. So I think that is why, they wanted all that space. So as it progressed and he became older and got closer into the camera, we would notice that difference. And there were several of the duos in this final round did some really neat camera technical things with camera angles. And there was one duo with some shadows that their bodies made with the lighting up against the wall. I mean, just some really creative things that I know all of us now need to think about, because we know that doing things virtually is a new reality. And so just a whole nother, almost like it's a whole nother event. And I appreciate how NSDA, kind of decided to have two divisions of duo, because of, different rules of different parts of the country, having even different schools and school districts. But it's almost as if, being virtual with duo could be its own category, because there's so many technical aspects that you could incorporate. but their acting, I think, is also phenomenal in this duo. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in the fun blocking and those other things that we forget that this is still an interpretation. And so acting is great. And great duos don't always have to force folks to play multiple characters either. And that's another great thing that this duo was able to show us. Sometimes a lot of those duos that we see with lots and lots of characters, that does not equate that that is a better duo. Not to say that duos that have lots of characters aren't great, but also good old fashioned acting prevailed in this final round, which was a nice thing to see.
And I'd like to put in my 2 cents worth, Jamelle. I think it's just like cutting a monologue for a DI. The ability to sustain a character for 10 minutes and see the metamorphosis of that character over the course of 10 minutes can be a beautiful thing to see. And the same thing can be translated here into duo, where they're each taking an individual character. I've done duos where a character has had a second character, a person has had a second character. But I so love seeing the transformation and that metamorphosis of each of those characters moving toward that climax and denouement at the end. It can be just brilliantly done. So I guess my preference is to see each person sustain a character for that length of time in that story.
That's good. I agree. That's great. That's great. Okay, I'm going to exit out of. And then just the last kind of question to ask, especially for all of us here in Kansas, to duo or duet? That is the question. And for those of us who also do NITALK, we know that duet is one of the events for NITALK along with duo. You know, depending on your classification in Kansas, is duet going to be offered tournaments I'm competing in, you know, and this is kind of one of those individual, I think, team coach kind of questions. Sometimes some pieces work better as a duet than a duo for whatever reason. Maybe it's so important to have that chair or those two chairs and that table, or the ability for these two characters to actually physically touch, that you can't imagine possibly for that same exact piece to turn into a duo. But just remember, the magic of duo is that we get to have the illusion that those things are happening and stepping outside of the box. And just because we feel as though that character or those characters need to sit down, how can we still allow the audience to have that illusion that they're sitting without the character even necessarily having to squat? You know, like thinking, how do we still, if we wanted this to be duo, transition our brain into thinking, I want this to be a duo, but I can't figure out how to make this happen or that happen. Those are all that's the fun of duo and the magic of duo. I usually try to have at least one team every year have a duet. And then of course, sometimes we can, that's the magic of Kansas competition. This weekend, this duo is a duet. Next weekend, that duet is a duo. You know, sometimes we have to do that as well. But I think having an intentional duet is fine. That's great, especially if that is what your team needs for whatever, you know, for state or for NITALK or for just invitationals. But don't let students make that decision just simply because they assume or think duet is the easy way out. And so they want to go that route versus taking on the challenge, of course, for duo. And then we've already talked about these things, kind of some of those style changes and differences that we see across the state, and what we even see differently across our own state and our country with different, national circuit tournaments and what works. And then also being flexible enough for judge adaptation. I know we really, really hammer that first semester with debate, but I think there's also a level of judge adaptation we need to teach our interpreters for second semester, and not just our interp kids, also our public address and our speakers. That there's a little bit of that should be happening as well in our interp rooms and in our public address and limited prep rooms. Not to go in and change, of course, just because we feel like this judge wouldn't like what we're doing, so we're now all of a sudden doing a different piece. No, not saying that at all, but just slight changes that may have to happen, even blocking changes or being able to adapt to the space that we're in. Last round we were in a classroom with lots of space, and we had this open area. We had all the space we needed for our duo to happen. Round 2, we're in a utility closet, right? So we have to adapt and change our blocking to make it work. And so kind of also, adapting a little bit to where we are in regards to our competitions. Any last questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, anything you wanted that this tonight did not provide? Please let me know and we can figure that out, because I am finished with what I had prepared for you all.
Jamelle, can you hear me? Maybe not.
She looks frozen.
Nick, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Don.
Oh, this is just, I think, an interesting point. When we were doing the rules for this around 94, 95, in our infinite wisdom, the first year we said, you may only play one character and one character only for each person. And then, and they really did, if you look at that 96 tape, the first year, kids did a brilliant job with that. Then, it kind of, the hammer came down and we thought, what were we thinking? And how much have we limited, the choices out there of literature? So that was changed by the next year. I just thought that's an interesting, old historical note that's not important at all.
No, that's super important. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's great. Because it's fun to think about what duo would have been if that rule stayed in existence, and how different the event would have looked today. But that is neat. That's a neat piece of knowledge. Thank you.
Duo has changed so much. I also think that even if tomorrow everything normalized, whatever that means now, and we were back to in-person tournaments forever, some of what we saw happening with cameras is going to migrate into in the same room performance. There are going to be techniques that people figured out because of cameras that are going to migrate, I think.
Ooh, I love that. That's really interesting.
Don't ask me for an example. I don't have one yet, but I think that will happen.
I was going to ask you for an example.
Give me about 3 weeks and we might have one.
So I have a question, observation. I don't know what it is. So I would say around 10 years ago, I felt I had a good sense of what would make a strong duo at nationals. And since then, I don't know if I've been able to follow the development of it so much. So, for a while, it was really techie. Those are the things that are going to go far, and large characterization, using a lot of space and energetic. And then I felt like there was a strong shift towards the dramatic and pulling away from a lot of that technical stuff. but not entirely. So I'm wondering, what do you feel how do you feel that it has changed or developed over the past decade, and where do you see it going?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm still kind of pondering also what Russ just commented on. Wesley, but first, Russ, I think, you know how like being aware of the camera and coming really close to the camera, that may
That's
become,
gonna stay.
yeah,
That will absolutely stay.
that uncomfortableness.
Yes.
Now doing it in person in front of the judge, that's interesting.
Also, Wesley, I think part of that is like what the way that Jamelle is talking about that is an example of what you're asking. Like, how do you keep up with it? Well, I think I was better at keeping up with it when I was judging rounds at nationals instead of working in a tab room at nationals. Like you could, one of the reasons I started to love NITOC was that I could see in May what some nationals things were going to look like come June. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but I know that tonight I pulled up I have a sheet from about 2007 that's labeled duo mechanisms. And I literally, after a nationals where a couple of my assistants and I were at nationals judging, went in and watched semifinals, and we just watched those like textbooks, and we just made lists of every technique we saw. And for years, I just handed that list to kids and said, you know, it's like 15, 16 things. And I'd say, pick 5. You need to do 5 of these things, you know?
Well, I think you need to share that.
So, well, but I think that Wesley's, I'll happily share it. I think Wesley's observation is that list is probably pretty badly out of date.
Yeah, it's weird.
I think Russ also picked up on one thing in regards to judging. And judging, I think even now with all the virtual options is a great thing. And when we can, you know, even though our kids necessarily can't compete in them, there's options for us sometimes to still judge them. And so connecting with some friends from other states and saying, hey, if you have a virtual tournament, please sign me up. Let me judge. I've been judging all year for all of the different NITOC mask different tournaments that they've had, just for that option to see kind of what's going on.
And it also gives you it also gives you the opportunity to see what material is playing out at the moment.
There, she's back. I thought we lost.
I think am I here now?
Yep, you're
you
here.
are.
Okay,
You're back.
all right. My Wi-Fi went wonky for a second there. I think I missed what you said, Pam. I'm sorry.
I think by judging like virtually as you've been doing also gives you as a coach an opportunity to see what pieces are out there. Not that you would replicate those, but it kind of gives you a flavor of here's what's new. Or maybe not so new.
Pam, I just sent you an email with that list. I don't know if
I just got that.
If you want to drop that in the chat so people can see it, you might do that. I don't want to mess the recording up, and I don't know what happens if I do that. So
Okay.
Jamelle, was there kind of in reference to Wesley's question, were there, obviously there were camera techniques, right? We've talked about that already. Were there things that you saw that were changes last year that surprised you or that you hadn't seen before?
The techie choreography, the fun, I didn't see that often. I didn't see that very often, especially at both night. I judged duo finals for NITOC and then also for NSDA, the asynchronous. And that was not, and I think we've kind of already started moving away from that several years ago, but that was definitely not the happening thing. The happening thing was some really dramatic some really true, like
Good acting.
good acting, good old fashioned acting, with some very real subject matters, you know, that I think just kind of looking at a slice of life. And that's what I just call it, looking at a slice of life, some real subject matters. And I just think that that's a nice change from what we saw like 10 years ago, you know, when it was all, you know, very, 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 you know, and that there's nothing wrong with that. I love that kind of duo style too, but really comical with multiple characters, great choreography, great dancing, great jumping over each other, you know, and all the arms and that style also was fun to, you know, but I think we've moved away from that. At least right now, it seems we've moved kind of away from that.
Well, and it's probably worth noting that if Pam puts those in the chat, they will all be in reference to that kind of duo, which seems to sort of be at least less popular, right? And I think you're right. I think we were moving away from that even before
Virtual. I think so too.
The Serio comic had really taken duo over, either heavy dramatic, or at most a pretty serious mixture, right?
I had a thought, and then off of that, and it left me. Because I saw the cat in the hat in the chat. Okay, I'll think about it. Try to come back to it. Got it. Okay. So Kansas Nationals. Differences that you notice between the two, and how do you adapt? Like once you're like, here's our districts, and now we're gonna prep for Nats.
Definitely what we do in Kansas doesn't always translate. I know we all probably figured that out a long time ago. Doesn't necessarily translate at nationals. And so a lot of changes have to happen. And I have, like I said, I have not mastered figuring it out. I do not have an NSDA finalist yet. But just even from the other national tournaments, NITOC and CFL, knowing that our style, I think, is more, I don't want to say maybe traditional, or maybe the things that work here. This is our Kansas cutting. So after state, it has to change. It has to adapt so that we can feel like we're going to be more competitive at the national level. And so knowing it has to change, like going in, knowing that it has to change. And I know, Wesley, from some of the kids we've seen from you, I know we have fun, like our kids love each other. I don't, just that dynamics is cool. The kids figure it out really quickly too. Their first time at nationals, like, oh, wow, there are things that look different here. But then there's some things that translate incredibly well. And so just figuring it out, and it's tough. I'm sure I imagine it's tough for everyone all across the country. That's one of the cool things about nationals, is kind of finding the niche and figuring it out. And you have judges from everywhere. So, but yeah, definitely we find that even material wise, things that would be considered too risque, and I'm willing to do some pretty darn, risky things, still is a little maybe sometimes safer than what we see. Oh, we could have really taken that risk with that piece. Oh, okay. And of course, still been okay and appropriate and what have you. And what's cool personally for my students is seeing more variety in regards to different types of literature and different types of individuals. And they get excited because more kids look like them at nationals than like on our local, circuit. And so it's always that excitement. The new and the unexpected, but making those changes are necessary. They really are. And I think we need to do better probably as a state to help each other out. I know in East Kansas for our district, we try to like swap kids out and watch each other's kids and just encourage each other's kids and make it more of we're going as a district, not just as individual schools. I know we we do that in some of the other events. I think we probably need to do that even more in the interp events, helping each other out before nationals, so we can go kind of on one accord versus as individual schools.
It's sort of like Team Kansas.
Yeah.
Minnesota
I'd say
that out really well.
I'd say pre-pandemic, I felt like our district and West Kansas and South Kansas were doing a lot of that too. And then, yeah, you know, COVID.
Yeah, I have a theory that, I don't know, maybe this is completely, I'm just not very smart sometimes, but my theory is that interp, especially dramatic interp things,
You don't need that. No.
whether it was DI or duo, or even like in our state prose and poetry, we're already heading for, even HI sometimes, we're already heading for a real shift toward speaking truths in favor of advocacy. I think that was already happening, and then POI hit, and it just drove, I think it drove everything that direction more solidly. I think that's filtered over into duo, but duo's been that way for years in some ways.
Yeah, with HI especially, I would tell my students, like, if you want to make this meaningful for someone, you've got your introduction sometimes. Sometimes that's what you've got, depending on what your material is. If you wanted to advocate for something, that's your chance to make those connections really clear. But yeah, I think that's you know, same with duo though, and the other interpretation.
15 years ago, when I cut a duo from the Weekly World News Bat Boy articles, I don't think there was much advocacy happening there, right? It was just
that would be the last show I did with Natalie at Washburn.
Yeah, but you did the actual script. We were actually using the Weekly
Yes,
World
I know. I know. I'll just call you Al McKeithen.
Probably been called worse.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I am finished, because I thought an hour and some change, but I am free to stay as long as you need me, and I appreciate everyone's input, and I learned a lot from all of you, so thank you for sharing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, Jamelle, I learned a lot from you, so as always, you can take a golden nugget from any one of us is a great thing to have happen.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Jamelle, thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to stop the recording